Morning, guys. Dr. Ken Nordberg here again, and again, and again, and again. With another really interesting hunting seminar. How many times have I said that this is one of the most important things you could ever learn about hunting older bucks? Really. So pay attention. This is important. And then remember too, before I forget about it, you'll find all the information I'm going to be talking about today in my new 10th edition. So if you forget these things, you need a quick reference, a deer camp or something, well, you're going to love this book because it's all in there, okay? Well, now let's get busy. You know, I've talked about this before, and I'm going to be talking about conditioning. You know, you've seen a couple of little shorts here recently about conditioning and hunting bucks. But I need to set this record straight about this. And it's important. I want you to understand it really well. Never heard of conditioning, I'm sure. Who ever heard of using conditioning to hunt older bucks? Nobody ever talks about that. This is new, really new, and I'm still learning. But I can tell you a lot about what you need to know that will make a dramatic difference in the number of older bucks you see during hunting season. I mean, it's like magic almost. But it's not easy. There's quite a bit involved here. But let me talk about this a little bit. You know, I already told you, I have a college degree in experimental animal psychology, which helped me to figure these things out. But a good deal of what I've learned about conditioning came from observations of the gray wolves that live in my study area, especially that first wolf pack. By the way, you see a lot of videos about wolves, and almost all of them leave you with the impression that wolves live in packs year-round. They don't. They hunt in packs during the winter, and not on Isle Royal maybe, but almost everywhere else. They hunt in packs during the winter in our area from the beginning of the second week in November until snow melt in the spring. And so then they hunt in packs. Now, in spring they disperse. Where they all go, I don't know, but two stay in my study area. The alpha male and female, I guess you would call them, of my study area. Two wolves. And they raise pups. Although in recent years they've been unsuccessful at raising pups, probably because of a lack of adequate food. How about that? They're eating blueberries a lot now, and other berries instead of meat. And I'm sure that doesn't sit well with them, but they eat what they can. But our wolves are having problems because there's so many of them, and our deer numbers are so low in that area where I study whitetails. A few miles south of the Ontario border, where gray wolves are at a historic high up there. So, and those wolves, they don't know this is Minnesota and that's Ontario. There's movement in both directions probably there. But at any rate, I learned much of what a hunter needs to know about hunting older bucks from those particular wolves. Now, one of the first things I noticed about this wolf-deer relationship in my studying area was that our whitetails most often didn't seem one bit alarmed by the sight of a wolf walking by. In the summertime, it'd be one wolf, and in summertime, our wolves mostly key on fawns all summer long. They'll kill and eat and probably feed their pups when they have them. 3 out of 4 fawns in our hunting area between May, mid-May when they're born, until about the 1st of November. And it changes then because at that point, a 7-month-old fawn can actually outrun a wolf. They're a little faster, but what gives them the advantage is when they run, they bound considerable heights above the ground, up to 8 feet. And they can jump over all kinds of obstacles in the woods that slow the chasing wolves. They have to go around them. Sometimes they'll even jump in a lake or in a river and swim across to avoid those wolves. But they have different ways of avoiding them. But the deer have an advantage. But normal, healthy, mature whitetail is definitely faster than a wolf. So wolves have to pick out prey that they can catch, prey that are slowed for some reason, either being very old, or very young, or wounded, or sick, something like that, something that keeps them from running as fast as a mature whitetail can run. So they're always searching for one that they can catch. Now, these wolves have 100 square mile or so hunting area in the wintertime when they're in the pack. There's about 100 square miles that they range through to find deer. And they go through that whole range about once every 4 days, searching for vulnerable deer. And what I was seeing in the beginning is these wolves in the process of searching for vulnerable prey. And I'd sit there and watching this doe and fawn over there, feeding over there a little ways, watching them, and then, oh, here comes a wolf. It's trotting by on this deer trail, the well-used deer trail, right between us like this. And those deer, their heads come up and they look at that wolf going by. They don't run away. They stand there watching it going by. And then finally, when they can't see it or hear it anymore, they go back to feeding. And I thought that was pretty amazing. Until I thought of, like African game, you've probably seen on TV where, these African antelope are feeding out there and in the presence of lions, the whole pride of lions, they're laying down, they're resting, and they're all feeding all around them, not paying any attention to those lions. But as soon as those lions get up and start stalking toward those antelope, then pandemonium ensues, then they run. Well, same way with our whitetails. They've learned how to live with wolves in a way that it makes it possible for them to avoid exerting excessive energy by running every time they see a wolf. They've learned to assess the behavior of the wolf before they decide what to do, unless the wolf is charging right through them, then they have to move instantly. But most of the time, it doesn't work that way for the wolves. But they assess the behavior of the wolf, and if the wolf is not hunting, they aren't worried about them. They might keep an eye on them until they're out of sight, but they aren't going to worry about them. It's only when that one wolf or the wolf pack is actually hunting that they worry about them, and especially if they think they're the selected prey of the wolf. And then they get out of there, and they start moving. Now, ordinarily, if first time I saw a wolf pack, there was 12 wolves in that pack. There was 10 adults and 2 pups. And they were moving along the bank of a stream in north part of the area we hunt early one morning, and they were going by. And there was a yearling buck and a doe standing off to one side and watching them go by. And the wolves were actually downwind of those deer, meaning they could smell those deer, and the wolves paid no attention to them. They just walked right by non-stop with their heads pointed straight ahead and moving at a moderate pace. Went right by them as if we aren't interested in deer here. We're just in a hurry, well, kind of in a hurry to get to someplace way down south of here somewhere. And when they're acting like that, the deer, if they recognize they are not a chosen prey, they don't worry about them. Now, but that isn't always what's the case, after a couple of years I discovered that when wolves are doing that in the presence of deer, and they have to know they're there, either because the deer are upwind and, you know, they can smell them as they're going by. And somehow I guess they can smell differences in deer that tell them, well, we probably can catch this one or we have no chance to catch this one. They know that deer. They probably sniff him at least once a day, one day every 4 days all through the winter. And so they know that. Oh, we've never been able to, waste of time, energy for us to chase that one. We aren't going to try to get them. So they go right by them until they're downwind and out of sight. And then they set up some kind of a way to get that deer. And actually our wolves set up a drive instead. It was a single driver. And when they decide, oh, we want to get that doe or that yearling buck, they'll all but one of the pack will circle well to one side downwind, and they'll center up on that one when they're downwind. And you can smell it. Well, it's right over there, and they even know how far it is, away it is by its odor. And so they don't try to get too close to that deer where they might be spotted, so they hang back a little bit. Meanwhile, the single wolf that stays back, the alpha male or female, will sneak back and try to get as close as they can to that deer coming in from crosswind. And usually any deer, except maybe a fawn, will notice that there's a wolf coming to them. It's sneaking, it's stopping often, it's sneaking, and maybe changing distance a little bit, halting and freezing when a buck or a deer happens to look in their direction, and he'll just freeze and not move, and finally the deer moves, then they sneak. When a deer notices that, they know they're a selected prey. And they're going to start running. Well, at that very moment, it's that single wolf's job to get as close to it, run right at it, charge right at it, and chase it downwind toward those other wolves. And they'll be waiting, and they'll hear them coming. Now, I've been where those other wolves are several times in my years of hunting there, and you can hear them coming, brush snapping, and you hear hoof beats. And you know, it's funny when a deer runs flat out in front of a wolf like that, instead of just bounding, they want to get ahead of them. They run flat out, close to the ground. They're not real high bounds along a deer trail, of course, if they can. And they're just going flat out downwind until they can gain some distance ahead of it, and then they can veer right or left to avoid ambush, because they expect ambush. Whitetails always expect that when they're being pushed in one direction. And but this single wolf keeps it from doing that by staying close behind it. And then when the rest of the pack hears them coming, they kind of spread out in front of it, downwind. And when it runs into their midst, one or two of them get a hold of that deer and they bring it down, and that's the end of the deer. Now, but they're only successful at that maybe 1 in 5 times, even though that's probably one of their best ways to get it. They got other ways. I've watched single wolves in the summertime stalking a bedded fawn. And they do it in a way so the fawn has no idea that's something dangerous. It's just walking this way and wagging its tail and sniffing the ground, edging a little closer and closer, and the fawn just is mesmerized by this. And, oh, there's nothing to be afraid of. It's like a squirrel or something. And they get closer and closer, and finally within one jump of grabbing that fawn by the ear or the neck, and that's it for the fawn. So, but they have different ways of doing this. But anyway, it's important to those wolves to keep that deer from running away when they select a prey. You know, if all deer immediately ran away, they wouldn't be able to catch most of them. 1 in 5 would be pretty good compared to how things would work out if that's the way they did it. But they want to get out of sight and get out of there without arousing that prey deer until they set up some kind of a hunt. And this was real common where we hunt. And I've never read of that in any book before. I've never found any of that kind of hunting described in anything about wolves in my whole life. So I don't know if that's common amongst our wolves all across northern Minnesota, but it's been common amongst 2 different wolf packs in the area I've been studying deer, so I think it's fairly common. But so what wolves are actually doing when they're going by a deer like that, their heads pointed straight ahead, not looking from side to side or stopping to sniff tracks and scents on the ground, that kind of. They just do it without stopping. Oh, there's one we want. And they just keep going. And the leader is alpha male or female, and they just keep going by, and all the rest filing them behind them until they're out of sight. That's an important thing. They're acting as if they're harmless, nothing to worry about. Now, and I mentioned this before, when I saw that, I wonder if that would work for humans. And the first chance I had to try it was when my wife and I spotted some deer. It was the middle of winter, Christmas time, and down an old back road, bedded down on one side. And we'll see if we can walk as if we don't know they're there. Just keep walking steady, don't stop, keep our heads pointed straight ahead until we're really close. We have our cameras all set. We stop, turn, get their picture. And gee, that worked good. And this works. I mean, we can use this for hunting. So that became the basis for all my future buck hunting, future stand hunting methods that we use. But the whole thing that we do when we're hunting whitetails is try to make all adult whitetails, including older bucks, believe we are harmless when we're with them. And we do a pretty good job of it. It really makes a difference. Now, I've got a rough map here. There's a typical square mile in our hunting area. In this case, in this particular square mile, there are 4 doe home ranges. They're outlined in brown here. You see that? Different sizes, from 90 to 120, 126 acres in size, about like that. In the middle, here's a stream running through here and a beaver pond here, and it runs down through here. These orange spots are forest area feeding areas. Areas that either are open and they have a lot of grasses and that kind of, grasses and clover growing in there and that kind of thing, or browse areas, which whitetails feed on after the first week in November every year. And different kind of woody shrubs that they feed on during the rest all winter and these kind of things. So these are feeding areas, these orange spots here, all of those. The brown spots are bedding areas. The brown ones are bedding, these bigger ones are bedding areas of does and their young. They're usually pretty large. They can be up to 20 acres in size. More often they're more like 10, 15 acres, and they can be long and they can be a little smaller in different shapes, sizes. These little bitty ones here are bedding areas of mature bucks, antlered bucks, bigger than yearlings. These are, the yearling bucks stay with their mothers in their mother's range, but older bucks they live in larger ranges that overlap and live within this square mile. And the big dominant buck, he owns this whole thing, but there's these other adult bucks or mature bucks living in that area, different ones. And this spot right here is commonly the bedding area of the big dominant breeding buck. Now, it's good to know where these things are where you hunt. It's really important in conditioning to know where those things are. When we scout, and we'll be scouting in about a week for the first time this year, it's good to know where all these things are. It's good to go here and see if that's still a feeding area, or if it's still got jaggedy brown tips on those woody browse plants where whitetails fed a lot during the previous winter, if it's still a popular place for them to feed. We need to know that. Sometimes we'll go in one that's been a good spot for years, and you go up there and you walk in, no sign at all. None of those little raggedy edges on the tops of the stems of these woody shrubs. They're not feeding here anymore. So it's good to know. You don't want to waste time on a place like that. And bedding areas, And buck area, you know, you go into a buck bedding area and you're going to alarm that deer, and it's going to be really upsetting to that buck. And when you do that during the hunting season, he's gone for the hunting season. And so we always do that at least 2 weeks before the opener. Get these bedding areas figured out early enough so that by the time opening day arrives, all those deer will be back in their usual home ranges doing things at predictable sites during predictable hours at predictable places. Well, bedding area, these feeding areas are the most predictable places to take a buck during the hunting season, because they're upright and they're moving around, and they're most predictable of all when they're accompanying a doe in heat. And breeding is going on during the period we hunt deer during our annual firearm hunting season up in this region. And so these feeding areas are kind of important. The bedding areas are important too, because we want to stay away from them. We'll hunt bedding areas maybe the last day or two of the hunting season, but not until then, because we sure don't want to chase the bucks we'd like to take out of that area before we're done hunting. So anyway, here's our camp. Now we have two kinds of trails. You know, I talked about these before, but I want to get you to understand this really well, how this works. Now, usually, before hunting season begins, we'll pick out, and my sons and I will each pick out about 4 stand sites for opening weekend. Sometimes 6, but 4 for opening weekend. And we'll do what preparations need to be done and pick out trails we're going to use to get to those stand sites. And we really try to find new ones every year, because we want to pick out stand sites that have no reason for a buck to avoid approaching the hill. I mean, they have no idea that that could be a dangerous spot for them during opening weekend. That's kind of stand sites we want for opening weekend. But nevertheless, by the 3rd day, every buck living in that square mile knows they are again being hunted by us Nordbergs. And they know that we have a habit of showing up in places they've never found us before. And you know, that's troubling to them, because they can't feel safe until they find us every day, beginning on day 3. And it's usually that period during which they have not yet found us at a new stand site, and when they do find us, that little period, and usually during the first 1 to 4 hours we hunt at any one stand, that's when we get the buck. But once they have us, then we don't have any chance of getting them at that stand site anymore that year. Because once a buck finds you at a stand site, and they're really good at it, they're going to avoid that. They'll stay out of sight of it. It's like you punch a hole in the map and they stay away from that hole, and they can live anywhere else they want in their home range. Theoretically. In our case, it's true. Chances are where you hunt, it's not true. If you got people wandering around in here on foot during the hunting season, before long, usually within 2 days, all the adult deer will be out of there. And you've got an empty home range. And you can sit there every day, all hunting season, and hardly see a deer, maybe a fawn or a yearling or 2, and that's about it. So, no, we don't like that to happen. We've been through that too many times. I have, in my 75 years of hunting whitetail. I never want to sit somewhere where I can't be fairly certain I'm going to see a big buck during the next 1 to 4 hours at a stand site. So, anyway, because of the importance of knowing where all these things are, we do a lot of scouting before the season, and it's gotten to the point that it takes us 2 long weekends to figure it all out. We'll be going up in a week, and we'll spend 3 or 4 days, and then later in October, well, in mid-October, we'll do it again. But anyway, so here's the kind of trails we want to find. We want to find these things for this reason. During the hunting season, beginning on day 3, after all those bigger bucks know we're hunting them, they're going to be doing the things that enable them to survive a hunting season, several hunting seasons. And they're pretty good at it. Oh, they're good at it. They're so good most hunters never see those deer by that time. There's not much chance of seeing them. And we know that too. But partly because the deer have left the area, the bucks especially. But anyway, we have two kinds of trails we use. Now let's say here's our camp here, and let's say we go right up into this area. Well, one of the things we want to be able to keep an eye on is these feeding areas. So we'll have a trail that we never cross a feeding area during the hunting season. And we have trails that go all the way around this area. This is kind of a circular kind of thing. Stay away from that. Well, stay away from that one. We don't want to get too close to that. We're going to stay 200 yards or more away from any buck bedding area. Yeah, but we want to know what's happening in that feeding area. And here, and here, and here. We want to know if a buck is with the doe in heat in any one of those feeding areas soon. And so we create this trail. See, it's roughly circular, and it's made up of deer trails. These are nothing but deer trails, or they're connecting deer trails. And we've select the ones we want to use that go close to all these bedding areas, so we can find out if a buck is with a doe in heat there on any one day. And so, anyway, we got this trail. We call that our cruise trail. It's the only trail we follow during the hunting season, well, except our stand side approach trails. Only trail we follow to find fresh deer tracks of a big buck, or maybe two of them, during the hunting season, which tells us where we want to hunt later today and tomorrow morning. We never hunt anywhere except where we're close to very fresh tracks and or droppings made by a big buck. There aren't many times in November when a ground scrape is important to us, because once drainage begins, big bucks don't have much time for maintaining the freshness of the musk scents on their ground scrapes. They don't have time for that. They're with does and searching for does, and searching for bucks that dare to sneak back the bucks they've chased out before breeding begins, so they have an exclusive breeding range here. Big dominant buck. So anyway, we want a trail we can walk every day. Now we might have a couple entrances to it. Like one down here. Yeah. More than one way to get there. Now, that's one kind of trail. We call that a cruise trail. Because when I found out wolves followed certain trails, I started calling them wolf cruise trails when they're searching for vulnerable prey. Well, we do the same thing, but instead of with our noses, we do it visually, looking for tracks and droppings of big buck, but only along those trails. During the hunting season, we don't walk off this trail and off of stand side approach trails. Maybe we might have one here, maybe 100, 200 yards long. We might have one here. We might have one up here, and maybe branches. We might have one over here. You see, we have all kinds of them. We maybe have one here, and it goes up here like that. But stand side approach trails that branch off from these trails, and we use the ones we use each day that enables us to get to feeding areas from downwind or crosswind, to stand sites that are located inside forest cover 10 to 20 yards back in, not right on the edge. Right on the edge is an easy one for bucks to recognize and avoid. We want them back in there a little bit, 10, 20 yards back in forest cover. But we end up, we have stand site approach trails 1 to 200 yards wide all over the place on this thing. And one maybe goes here. It depends on wind direction. Now, some of these are the ones that we selected to use opening weekend, but a lot of these are selected only after we've scouted each day. So on day 3 at about 11 o'clock, typically, that's when we all get out of our stands, either up in a tree or on the ground level and go back to camp for lunch. And on the way, we'll walk one direction or another. When you're scouting midday, doesn't matter what direction the wind is blowing. In fact, in some cases, it's probably even better that you're walking downwind. But it's usually the case. Wherever you go any one day, you're going to do some walking downwind. But if you do it properly, using the wolf ruse, always, never hunting on, always walking non-stop with your head pointed straight ahead, and looking like you're only interested in getting to camp, which you are, but finding along the way, oh, look at these fresh tracks going across, or look at these clump droppings up ahead there, 1 inch long, each drop, that's a big buck. Or these rocks, look, you're looking at these things and oh, that buck and doe, maybe they're together, or just the buck, walked up toward this feeding area right here. So that's where he's feeding right now, or that's, maybe there's a doe and estrus there, but he's there today. Let's say you went out in the morning, early in the dark. We always get to our stand sites 1 hour before sunrise, or a half hour before the first hour of legal shooting hour of the day begins. We always get there then. And we find fresh tracks on the way. Oh, geez, buck and doe, or just the buck itself maybe, walked into this feeding. A lot of times when that happens, we're, oh, heck with going to that spot or where I was going to go. I'm going to go here, and I don't even have a stand site in there. By day 3, most of us are almost always sitting at ground level on our backpack stools. We can carry those anywhere. They don't make any noise. They don't rattle. They're made with oak frames and camouflage paint. We can carry those anywhere. And that when you say, well, I want to be up here watching this one because that buck is there right now. Get there early, it's dark. Well, I'm going to sneak in here. When I was over here earlier, when I was scouting here, weeks earlier, there was some good deer trails going in toward that thing. There was a circular trail around there, and I'm going to go in there, a deer trail, and I'm going to go in there and park right up close to that somewhere. Sometimes, we'll head off in that direction. It's just getting kind of open, Deer feeding areas tend to be kind of open, except when they're feeding on acorns. It's right up ahead here, We know our area so well, but it's kind of problematic at point where to sit. And a lot of times what I'll do, I get close, I'll sit down on my stool right there and wait until it gets light enough. And that's usually, it's light enough to see well enough so I can move to the right or left or forward a little bit up to a spot where I really have good concealment provided by natural cover. We use natural cover. We don't use artificial blinds of any kind. Just natural cover today. We've gone through all the blind business, making brush blinds and using the new pop-up blinds, and we all got those. And it's gotten to the point where the only blinds we use today are natural cover, really heavy cover. You can sit down there and you're practically it's going to be really impossible for deer to notice you because you got lots of cover in front of you, a solid background behind you with tree trunks and evergreen boughs and trees with leaves behind you, all kinds of stuff in front and behind you. Behind you is almost more important than in front of you, as long as you're sitting very still there. And to watch this trail adjacent to a feeding area, or watching a section of the feeding area out in front there from back in this cover. And oh, this looks good here. I got this spruce tree fell down, the wind knocked it down, and it's still got green stuff. Well, it could be all red even now. It's been there, laying there for months and months. But I got a good natural blind here. And I'll sit down behind it. And I put my stool down without making a sound. You can't do that in the morning with a tree stand. You can't put it up just anywhere without making enough racket to warn every deer within hearing. That's quite a ways. Oh, there's a human over there messing around and climbing a tree or whatever. But when you're using a stool, no sound when you put it down. You sit down on it and you're all set to start hunting. And here's those fresh tracks of that buck out here, that trail or out in the feeding area there you can see out there. oh yeah, he's been here, or he's here right now somewhere with that doe. And they'll be here until probably 9, 10, maybe 10:30 this morning. And we've taken lots of bucks on even on opening day, just with that kind of stuff in front of us. But that's what we want, natural concealment at ground level. But we do that, like I say, from day 3 until the end of the time, 2-week period we normally hunt. Like last year, we got 2 bucks opening day. One in the morning during that first legal hour shooting time in the morning. One in the evening during the last legal shooting hour on opening day. We got another dominant breeding buck on the 5th day. Another dominant breeding buck on the 8th day. Now, not many hunters enjoy that, being able to take deer all through a hunting season within the same hunting area, because in most areas where you got people wandering around or not doing things properly, they're going to be gone. So we condition our deer for all of this well before a hunting season, well, from day 1 until the end. And this goes on year after year. And what we do, whenever we're on any trail, whether coming or going or scouting midday on this one trail, big trail, boy, you can see, you got lots of ways you're going to see deer. We always walk without stopping, non-stop, at a moderate pace with our head pointed straight ahead, just walking along comfortably, going straight out, or it seems like we're going. We're not interested at all in hunting deer. All you have to do is bend your knees a little bit, pick your feet up the ground, put your feet down lightly. And if the deer head around your tree stand can't figure out what you are because of your footsteps, they're not going to go away. They might move off a little bit, but then when you get your tree stand, it's silent and they see no movements or anything, within a half hour they'll be coming back toward you freely. Now, this is contrary to what almost every deer hunter in America has been taught. To sneak and stop often and look around and believe you're fooling deer by doing this into thinking you're just another feeding deer. You're stopping often, that kind of thing. They do that too, but there's a lot of other sounds you make while you're doing that that tell you you're not a deer. You're breaking twigs too often that snap loudly underfoot. You're stopping. You know, you think of a deer, he's out there. I used to say there's heavy cover between you and where he's standing there on the edge of this feeding area, and he hears this clump, clump, your feet hitting the ground in the snow or in the ground or dead leaves, and then stopping. They take 5, 6 steps and then stop. Well, to me, that, especially in wolf country or lion country or tiger country, that would be scary sounds. Something is sneaking. It's not eating. You don't hear it chewing or breaking off clumps of grass or breaking off a slender woody stem on a browse plant. You don't hear that. You don't hear that chewing. You don't hear that. That's no deer feeding. They know that. That's something sneaking and it's coming closer. No, sir, you aren't going to fool that deer at all by that kind of behavior. But if they hear steady, they're standing there listening, assessing your behavior, whether they see you or not. And you're just going steady, crunch, 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 crunch. You're going by, or swish, swish, swish as you're going by. And then they see you even. Oh yeah, and your head's pointed straight ahead. You're not hunting, you're just going straight through. Nothing, you're not moving in their direction. They don't have to get out of the way. You're just going along this trail, that's predictable path. Oh, he's on that trail, he's going by. I'll just stand here until he's out of sight, make sure. And you keep going and pretty soon you're gone, they can't hear you. They go back to feeding, no problem. That's what happens. Now, when you do that all the time, when every Nordberg is in the woods doing this, there's not a deer in the whole area around here that doesn't recognize us. You know, once a deer has a chance to study you, what you're doing in the woods, they'll form an opinion about them that'll last their lifetime unless you do something to change it. You can change it. But if they've decided you're a dangerous hunter because of the way you act when you're out in the woods, the way you're moving around, well, you aren't going to see them. They hear you coming, they're going to stay out of sight of you. They're not, they'll maybe stay frozen in cover, and you don't even notice them. Gee, there could be 3, 4 of them right over there, and you don't see them, but they're watching you going by, and they see you sneaking, they see you stop and look at tracks, maybe even get down with a ruler and measure tracks. Things like you're really interested in their trail scent, they think, you know, your tracks. That's dangerous behavior as far as they're concerned. They don't want to have anything to do with a human who does those kind of things. Just think of that. There's going to be millions of hunters out in the woods this November that are walking all over the place from dark to dark. And just think of how they're being viewed by all the deer living in this area. Maybe not so much by fawns, and yearlings will make mistakes too. That's why they're particularly vulnerable during hunting seasons. But all those older deer, oh, that's a dangerous sight. And that's what he smells like. Next year it comes along, oh, he's back, that same one. And he uses that trail and he goes and sits there. Now, when that happens, you're going to have an awful hard time trying to see big bucks, especially because they're the best, they're masters at staying out of your sight while you're hunting. And but they've got you figured out. You're dangerous. No, I'm not going to mess around with him. I'm going to stay clear away from this trail this guy uses or this area where he goes and sits. And we had the same trouble back in the beginning. Yeah, well, so what can we do about this? So we didn't realize, what you don't see, you don't realize is happening. I can see where a lot of hunters start to think, geez, there's just no big bucks around here anymore. You hardly ever see one. And something's got to be done to improve the numbers of bucks in the area. But that's not true. There's more big bucks in America today than there was 60, 70 years ago. Simply because most hunters can't take them. You can't even see them. So, anyway, so we had to do something. Well, after, my studies at the University of Minnesota, we were going to do some conditioning and see how that works. And so we started making it a point to walk in the woods, going to and from stand sites, like I explained, wherever we go. And by doing that, things start happening. Now, you appear harmless to whitetails when you walk that way, going to and from a stand site. You're just harmless. They might be cautious about staying a little ways away from you and watching you go by and wait until you're out of sight before they start moving again. But you're harmless when you do that. And that's the best thing. You want your deer to think you're harmless, including those huge bucks. That improves matters quite a bit. Now, when you get to a stand site, and you get up in the tree or you sit down on the ground somewhere and don't move, you're also harmless. And so that's why stand hunting is still the best way to hunt older bucks. But you have to do it differently. You can't do it the way everybody's been doing it forever and ever. Using lure scents and sitting in one tree or one spot on the ground for year after year after year. Because we've learned, it's not 100% sure, but we've learned that big bucks find us very quickly if we're truly near them wherever we sit in the morning or evening. If we're close to a trail or area like a feeding area where they are right now, the odds of those deer, more than any other deer, those big bucks, the odds that they're going to find us with or without our knowledge are really great. We've learned that most of the time, way more, maybe 90% of the time, they'll find us before we even realize they're there. We don't know that they found us and now they're avoiding us and now they're staying out of sight in this area. But they like us stand hunters because we don't pursue deer. We don't walk all over the woods all the time. We just go in one place and sit there. So we're sitting ducks. Well, it's so easy for them to avoid it. So once they got us there, they'll spend the rest of the hunting season staying out of sight of that stand site. They might pass it downwind daily even. Oh yeah, he's still there. They smell your airborne scent. You can't prevent that no matter what you wear or what you put on yourself. There's always going to be airborne scent that'll identify you to deer downwind. So, oh, he's still there. Well, I'll just keep staying away from there. Don't have to worry. So anyway, but that's the trouble spot, you know, as a stander. We got everything else all figured out now, how to keep deer from becoming alarmed by us, how about getting deer to think we're harmless. But that one thing is that they so often find us without us knowing it, and they start avoiding us right away for the rest of the hunting season. And years after that, you know, the following year you come back and you go back to the same stand site, and they're going to come along and they're being cautious about it because they know whitetails have excellent memory, especially those older bucks. Boy, once they got that kind of information in their brains, they never forget it until they die. And oh, I wonder, you know, there's been human voices out here now the last few weeks, and traffic, a lot of cars on the road out there. Hardly ever hear cars around here all summer long. Those older bucks recognize those kind of things as plays to hunter now. They'll go downwind and, oh, he's back in that stand site. You know, they don't call them stand sites quick, but he's back. So, well, that's easy. I just stay away from there. Well, we've learned that. Now, that happens at least 90% of the time when you're hunting older bucks. Your mature buck effectiveness of any stand site is short-lived. Can't be helped. We're dealing with a superior, very intelligent animal here. It only lasts a little while. Now, if you choose to use the same site all season and season after season, that same buck will never forget, and he'll just find it so easy to avoid you. So we've learned to change stand sites every half day. Now we got it down, we were sit there for 2-3 days and then one day, and finally we got it down every half day now. We change stand sites. We might be missing the boat once in a while by doing that, but most of the time we won't. And what that does is, that buck, it's troublesome to that buck at the beginning of one day, any day during the hunting season, to not know where you are. He's not there. You know, where is he? They've been dealing with us Nordbergs long enough, so they know they can pop up anywhere. You know, sometimes they're just dumbfounded by it. They seem like, how in the world did that hunter end up right there? You know, and during those moments, we get them. But anyway, so we move every half day, but always within easy shooting distance downwind or crosswind of fresh tracks or droppings of a big buck, especially one that's with a doe and heat. Now, what we do, walking in the manner I described to you, to and from stand sites, and stand hunting, on the ground level or up in a tree, are two of the best things you can do to condition bucks into, and other deer, into thinking you're harmless while you're hunting. But like I said, the problem is older bucks are really good at finding you so quickly. Now, usually within the first 1 to 4 hours that you use a new stand site, they'll find you. So one of the things we had to do is start changing stand sites every half day, and we use a lot of stand sites, like in a square mile like this, based on what we find each day between 11 and 12 on our way back to camp for lunch. And that tells us where to go, to later today or tomorrow morning, or sometimes right now. Sit down right here, right now. Okay, and what we're talking about, you know, this moving every half day is our best stand hunting technique. We call it opportunistic stand hunting. And it's made opportunistic by that stool you can carry around your back. You can go anywhere with it. any time of day, every half day of a hunting season, with a lot less identifying sounds than you would make while using a tree stand. If you had to put a tree stand up every morning during the hunting season to hunt in a certain spot, all those deer within hearing, some of them maybe even within half mile. See, I used to have a climber that had a certain bolt, and if you didn't get that in the proper place, and then you kind of let go a little bit, it would go really loud. I'll bet deer within a half mile could hear that one and say, oh, there's that guy. But anyway, you can do this with almost complete silence when using a stool. You don't make any noise, and you put it down and you sit down and you're set to hunt. You're a stand hunter, as good as any hunter in a tree or on the ground anywhere, as long as you're using natural cover for concealment. Good cover. Okay, so you got that. Now, lots of good things happen when you do all this. Lots of good things. For example, big bucks living in this area come to realize that they don't have to worry about you when you're going to and from stand sites. And they come to realize, see, you usually do that like, you come by about 5:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning in that area. So I've known lots of bucks, or the big ones, that bedded in spots where they could actually see you in the dark passing during that period. And midday bed where they could actually see you heading back to camp or walking on parts or portion or all of your cruise trail going back to camp. Usually we only have to go through half of it, maybe go here and come out, or go here and come out, to find all the buck signs we want to find for hunting later today and tomorrow, usually. So, but anyway, by doing that, that buck will brazen, and other deer, fawns does with fawns and other deer, will brazenly bed so close to that trail. We even have them bedding close to our camp where they can hear and then see us walking by on this trail to know which direction we're going, and gee, it's gone now, and what safer place could we have than a bed right here by this camp.
Hey guys, this is John here. I wanted to show you the doe bed. That's 2 fawn beds. And we have a logging trail right over here, but if a hunter or a car goes down that logging trail right there, the doe will know what's happening.
And they do that. I mean, we're absolutely amazed when we discover those kind of things. Those deer can be so smart about these things. Well, anyway, they come to realize that we don't have to worry. And what happens next when you condition them now to think you're safe walking around here, you don't have to worry about it. They're going to come to think that it's safe to use any portion of this trail that they want during hours you don't normally come along, going out or coming back. And you do this, you do that in the morning, you go in, come back. On the evening, you go out and come back, or at late afternoon, come back after dark a lot of times. And it's safe to use those same trails where you're using. They're sharing it with you, or vice versa. And that almost guarantees you will have no trouble finding big tracks of big bucks, big tracks and big bucks every day. Not only are these deer going to stay in their home range, but they're going to feel free to walk across this trail, this cruise trail, or any stand site approach trail, which we only use once per hunting season, sometimes twice. And so there's not much trail center whether you use a trail going to a stand site, stand site approach trail, only once, well, within 4 days, none of your trail scent is going to be there anymore. It's going to be all faded away by that time. So this area, no sign of any hunter there, no smells or things to see. So they live here. Oh, they got all kinds of areas they can live in there without any trouble. They know it. Oh, they're not, those Nordbergs never bother us in bedding areas. They never bother us, except when, you know, they walk by us a little bit about them. Well, we want to assess their behavior, but if they're acting harmless, well, no problem. So they stay there all season. And you can get a big buck today, tomorrow, the next day or the last day of the hunting season, as often as you can get one the opening weekend when you hunt this way, when you do this. So that kind of, when you hunt in this manner, your chances of finding the kind of deer signs, the fresh, big tracks like 4 inches or fresh clump droppings that droppings inch long, when you find them along the way, your odds during the first 1 to 4 hours you hunt in that area are going to be way up there for taking a big buck. Way up there in that time. So there's several ways this is already greatly improving your chances for seeing and taking big bucks. So anyway, those deer. Now sometimes, and this has worked out, I've had a buck gave me a clinic last year about what do you know about me? And he outfoxed me, but sometimes what we've done is we've used our own trail. We've hunted, get back away from the trail on the downwind or crosswind side in an area of a section of it that's being used by a big buck. During the time hours we don't normally travel there. We find one like that. We'll try to outfox the buck by getting off the trail back a little ways and circle around, come in and get within sight of where we're going to see that and have real natural cover. And by golly, here about 8 o'clock or maybe 7:30, 8 o'clock, or maybe a little later, like 9:30, here comes the big buck on that section of trail. We've conditioned him to thinking it's safe to do that. During hours, we don't ordinarily use those trails, you see. That's a great thing. Here's some other things that can happen. You know, I mentioned that a few times. We use 6 different variations, new variations of stand hunting to take older bucks, all of which we say are mature buck effective, as opposed to anything you're doing. That's not mature buck effective. You don't do these things, and consequently, it's got to be pure luck for you to get a big buck. And pure luck does not reward you with many opportunities to take big bucks. Probably only 1 or 2 times in a lifetime. Well, maybe more, but we get a little rattled and sometimes goof up when it happens. So that's natural. That's human. But anyway, you don't get many opportunities to take big bucks when you hunt your way. But you start seeing more and getting more when you hunt our way. Now I mentioned 6 different variations, and we use them under different circumstances. Like for example, in our midday cruises, or going to and from stand sites, we learn a big buck, it might be a lesser buck, maybe not a dominant breeding buck, or whatever, it's a bigger buck anyway, is feeding all the time in here. And you know, you come by here and you sit over here somewhere, and geez, you find out later, oh, he was over on this side. And so then you go over there, and the next day he's on this side. And then the thing goes all the way up here somewhere to go to his bedding area. And he'll go this way, or maybe he'll go this way, or check on does, walk across this feeding area, or this one, and finally gets there. So you go over here and sit here one day, and oh, he goes on this side, and then you go over here on this side, and then he's on that side. Really frustrating. And oh, big bucks can be frustrating like that. You think, they're amazingly lucky. And of course, big bucks are lucky, but it's mostly because they are really good at avoiding human hunters. You know, you're not a wolf, you're not a bear, you're not a tiger. you're not near as stealthy as any of those animals, and they have an awful time being successful at taking deer often enough to satisfy their hungers. And if they can't do it, how do you figure you can? You can't. Just give up the idea that you're so stealthy that no deer in the woods knows you're around. Or you sneak so well they can't hear you coming, that kind of thing. Maybe fawns and yearlings can be taken that way, but big bucks, forget it. So you're just ruining your chances in future hunting in the same area by hunting in that manner. So, but anyway, like say, I got a buck that's giving me all kinds of trouble like that. It's a good place to use what we call cover all bases buck hunting. And get the boys together and we plan ahead and see the wind's right for all this, and everybody gets to different stand sites around this area, including maybe one side of that bedding or a downwind or a crosswind side of the bedding. And next morning, get out there in the dark. Got to be good woodsmen to get to where you want to go without the buck knowing it. Sometimes it works well if the buck does know it and he gets away, he gets around this hunter and he thinks, now I'm safe, you know, he's sitting, used to seeing me around there only. So I can walk around here and go to my bedding area without any trouble. And then he runs into somebody like my son Ken, who drops in the snow and that buck's now on the wall. You know, I've got a couple stories like that. But anyway, or sometimes we say, oh, this buck is with a doe in heat, and he's tracks in snow, he's dragging hoofs from track to track, and they went over there, and he just found him today on the way back to camp in the evening. Oh, in the morning, let's set up a gentle nudge hunting technique. One guy upwind of where they are, of the feeding area, and the other guy on the downwind side, and you have to get there. The guy on the downwind side's got to get there before the hunter on the top, and then the hunter on the top gets there a little bit later, 15, 20 minutes later, and he walks crosswind, so the deer don't realize, and so the deer, when they smell him up there, and knows that he's not coming toward them, then he sits down here, and his scent is spreading out over that feeding area, and so once they decide, oh, he's not moving now, he's just sitting there, that scent is just steady from one place there. Walk over here and it fades, walk over this way, it fades. It's not getting stronger, he's not coming near, it's not going away because the scent just stays the same strength all the time. Nothing to worry about. He's one of those Nordberg stand hunters, so we can feed all we want out here and not worry about him. So they're eating, and finally it's, you know, in wolf country they often go to their bedding areas by 9:30 in the morning. So let's say it's 9:30 now. Well, it's time to go. This doe that he's with, let's go to your bedding. Well, we can't go that way because that hunter's still sitting up there. So where's he going to go? Because it's his own choice, he's going to go downwind. And I've mentioned this before. If I were to try to drive him that way, oh, here I come, they'll just go shooting out, they'll way ahead of me, and they'll be right or left well before they get to the downwind hunter, and then we've lost that chance. But they're just sitting there. Then they decide, well, let's go this way, downwind. And the hunter's waiting, and the downwind hunter generally gets the buck when you set up something like that. It might be at a feeding area, it might be at the doe bedding, or maybe now at midday the doe is over here, and we can do that, set up a gentle nudge in that area as well. So, but we've got all these different ways of hunting, and some are more applicable to hunting in one place than the other. And so sometimes, like progressive stand hunting, we might start out here, you know, closer to camp, and watch this feeding there. Maybe they aren't breeding right now, maybe they are. Maybe there's no snow on the ground, so we can't see dragging of hoofs, you know, in the snow. Hard to find tracks even, but too measurable, you know, you can see, oh, that's a 4-incher. You might not see those very easily, and so when a case like that, then we're almost wholly dependent on fresh droppings maybe. About, oh, here's some clump droppings, big ones. And we're right over here on this side of that feeding area, when we were coming back to camp, that buck is there. And maybe a little ways from it, a few feet, there's some droppings, also fresh. only half-inch long, a puddle of them. Ah, that's a doe, a mature doe. So chances are they're feeding, well, it's almost certain they're feeding in here now. Now that doe's only going to be in estrus for 24 to 26 hours, so you got to jump on this. So tomorrow morning, I'm going to get to a downwind or crosswind side. The downwind's all right if you're only going to hunt there that one time, because when they come back, if they come back later and you hunted downwind, you got trails set all over the place that's telling them, oh, hey, we can't go to this place. That's fresh trail set of a human. So they'll say, oh, well, let's go over here and hunt and feed there, or over here, or here, instead. So you can, but we don't stay in one place very long anyway. But let's say I decide I'm going to move over here because that's where they are. They spend all their time there, and I don't have much time left. Later today I'll go back here and try it there and stay crosswind. And that way the wind isn't blowing into the feeding area, and sit there. See, there's all these variations we have can be used in different ways throughout this hunting season. And we generally end up using all of them during the course of a hunting season. And sometimes we get lucky and, gee, the first thing we use is, oh, I got them opening morning, 9:30 in the morning, or 8 or 7:30, or maybe 6:30, right when it becomes legal to shoot. There's the big buck with the doe right over there, and an easy shot. So all those things, we use them. That's why we don't rely on one method alone, because sometimes other methods work better for some things. Progressive hunting, progressive standing is good for when you don't have snow. And then all you do then is just keep keying on feeding areas, going from one to another and get further and further away. Rather than start over here and work your way back, start close and work your way out as you go. Maybe skip one if there's, you don't think, you haven't found anything to indicate that deer are feeding here, but you never know. But working your way around like that. And sooner or later, you're going to be sitting there, and there comes a doe out of the woods and walks out and starts feeding, and here comes the buck. And that's kind of exciting stuff. So, there. Now, sir, or ma'am, or youngster, a young guy or a young girl, you know about conditioning and how it can affect your deer hunting, your buck hunting. If you want to take big bucks often, the rest of your life, you need to convince the deer you're hunting that you're harmless when you're on foot and when you're sitting somewhere, and sitting in being a stand hunter is one way of doing it. You're harmless, although you're easy to avoid. Or you're harmless when you're walking on the few trails you use. You don't walk all over this country during the hunting season, only on those specific trails. That cruise trail is a sacrificial set of connecting deer trails. But it isn't really sacrificial, because once those deer realize you're harmless when you're walking by, whenever you use this, they're always that way, they start using it too. And so you just kind of set them up for hunting, for successful hunting in the very near future, So conditioning. Teaching them. We first learned about conditioning with bear hunting. Now, I've talked about that before, but when we learned bears can smell hunters in trees, and they do, like when one climbed up to my son Dave's tree stand to get a jar of honey that was sitting under his seat there on the tree stand. We said, holy cow, they can smell honey, they can smell hunters up there as well. And so the way we condition bears is start baiting 2 weeks early and getting the bear used to smelling you each time it comes to stand. So, well, this smell is part of the total package of all these interesting smells that we provide in bear hunting. So that when you finally start hunting there, the first time you go in there, and you go in quietly and in the afternoon only, you go out about 1, 2 o'clock, never in the morning, because if that bear is there in the morning, and they feed about the same time as deer, and you alarm that bear, he's done coming there during daylight hours. He won't come back anymore. Maybe not at all. And so you don't want that to happen. So you only hunt in the afternoon, evening. And if you do that, and when that bear comes along, big bears have a habit of circling that bait site before they come in. Check your trail sense. And we like to go in early so it isn't just fresh, like, oh, hunter just went in there. And oh, I think I'll wait till after dark before I go. But instead, well, he hasn't been here since earlier today. And usually that's when he brings the food in here, so it's safe. It's safe. So they'll circle around, be kind of cautious, and a lot of times they come right under your tree stand, right in front of you, white as a steer, walking right by underneath you and going over to your bait and your positioning bait. I won't talk much about that now, but when we learned that, I had to know whitetails can smell hunters and trees as well. And so that opened up a whole new way to hunt deer, and the lessons we received from the gray wolves of our hunting area, bless them, 2 different packs over the years. Because packs don't, these wolves don't live forever, and 4 or 5 years, a lot of them are dead. But anyway, what we learned from them, along with what the bear taught us, that opened a whole new system of deer hunting. And a reason for conditioning and being faithful about it. Never, ever hunting along any of these trails during the hunting season. Walking along, sneaking, stopping off and looking around. Never, never. When you do that, you've ruined not only your buck hunting, your chances for taking a big buck, but chances for taking almost any mature doe as well. A lot of those does are pretty smart. They live longer than bucks, and they get pretty smart about all this as well. So, let's say somehow all the bucks that live in this square mile are convinced you're harmless when you're on trail, but you alarm a doe by acting as if you're hunting over here somewhere, say. And she decides, oh, I'm going to go in this big spruce bog over here and get out of here. It's dangerous, this hunter's here. And it goes bounding off, snorting in that direction. All the bucks in this area have suddenly discovered you can't be trusted to be harmless when you're walking in the woods. All of a sudden, that human can turn against you. Yeah, that human can suddenly turn into a dangerous hunter. When he's walking like, he can start hunting. He sees the deer head, he starts sneaking, that kind of thing. If it isn't, like if you are, like you're scouting or heading to a dance rite, and you do see a deer head, that's a reason to stop and wait till that deer is out of sight or hearing. If it's not one if it's a buck, of course, and you got a shot, well, of course you take the buck, and that takes care of that. But that won't happen much. Because regardless how sneaky you think you are, they're going to hear you when they're still a safe distance away and spot you moving, that thing. So anyway, conditioning is one of the biggest things you can do to improve your stand hunting for big bucks, or any other deer for that matter. And remember, you're not only conditioning, not only need to condition big bucks, but all the other deer living in that area, because boy, they act like a shield of protection for any big buck living in that area. You startle any of those other deer, that buck living in that square mile is going to hear them. All those bucks living in that square are going to hear that doe snorting and bounding, crashing through brush as it goes. It's alarming them all. There's a dangerous thing over here. And more likely it's human because it's a hunting season. So you don't want that to happen. Instruct your little kids when they're starting to learn. Don't you dare stop all the way. Keep your head pointed straight all the way to your stand site, whether hunting bears or deer, all the way. And get up there and sit still. And you're not really a buck hunter until you're sitting still up there. Then you're a buck hunter. All the rest of the time you're just doing all the things you gotta do in order to be a buck hunter sitting at a stand site. But once you're stand hunting, sitting still on the ground, then you're a buck hunter. Then your odds of getting a buck are pretty good. But not like in the old days, you gotta move often, because boy, they get you most of the time. The odds are always in favor of the buck for identifying you at a new stand site without you even knowing it. And so, move often. If you're doing mile-a-day stand hunting, well, you're gonna move every hour or so. And that's all right, as long as you do it properly. But there you go, guys. I hope you understand this well now. I hope you understand it. Now, I know this upsets everything you've learned about how to hunt whitetails. Now, it's like nothing you ever heard of before. All you guys that are just so anxious to take a decent buck, this is the quickest way to do it. Although, you know, it might take 2 or 3 years before you have a trail system like we have. And then every year, you know, we might decide, oh geez, they never come and feed in this area anymore, so we'll just not use that trail anymore, and we'll use these. So portions of our cruise trail can change every year or 2 or 3 years. It can be different, a little different. And we mark our cruise trails and the stand site approach trails that we're going to use opening weekend with fluorescent tacks, so we can find our way to them or away from them back in the evening back to camp with that flashlight. And all those tacks just, I look like Christmas tree bulbs all the way there and all the way back. We do that. That's extra work. And then here's one of the deer trails we use, or we've been using for the last 3 years. It's a pretty good deer trail through here. It makes it easy to get through this country. Just imagine walking anywhere in this area except on that deer trail. It would be really tough going. You couldn't do it without making a lot of noise. So you'd be ruining your chances to see a deer just walking cross country through this area. No way. It'd be impossible to go quietly enough. But when you're walking on a deer trail like this, you can do it. This thing needs a little cleaning up. As usual, every year we find dead branches laying on it and that sort of thing, and so we toss them aside, you know, things like this. Get that out of the trail, throw them aside, like that. There's one sticking out across the trail, get rid of that. There's one here, dead branches. Now we got a relatively clean trail and you can walk up very quietly on this trail. If you're 100 yards away, would never know if you walk softly and without stopping. They won't be able to know what you are. So, this is what we do. Trails we're going to use, we throw the tree branches, dead branches, and pull some of those trees aside or logs so we can be more silent at getting to our tree stands. That's important too. So, and we try to pick areas where we have good cover in the last 100 yards, maybe 50 yards at the most, or at the least, and arriving at our stand site. So deer out there where we expect to see them can't see us till we're there. And maybe there's a high ridge in front of you, things like that, but we try not to be seen. A lot of hunters feel like deer can't see you in the dark, but they can see you in the dark as well as by day, even when there's only starlight. You know, there's full clouds up there, maybe a little thin moon. The clouds are kind of illuminated a little bit by that little thin moon. They see you just as well as by day, so you have to be careful then as well as that during the day. So, conditioning, like I said, that's a huge thing in buck hunting. So, learn this, and don't expect to be able to get your hunting area with look like this, set up like this in one season. You know, do a part of it, maybe third or a half of it in 1 year. And that'll make a big difference. And then you're gonna see a difference. Things are gonna start to happen. Oh my, did I see a big one today? Or I got one, look at this one. You know, it's gonna be that way. You watch and see, I promise you. Okay, with that, gang, I've talked enough. It's a big line. It's been a big, long seminar, but it's such an important one. So, thanks for watching, guys. And be sure to hit that subscribe button. Too many of you watching don't do that. You know, you just hit the end of the thing and you go click and you're off, you know, before all the ads come up. And I got a lot of them that happen even in the middle and the beginning. And even people running for president are using my seminars now to get to you. Imagine that. But anyway, but do that. Click on that. That doesn't cost you anything, and it'll do you a favor and me a favor, and then the thumbs up button as well. Do that too, would you please? And thanks again, and I'll see you again soon. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.